Alright, so Quest for Metal told me I should review this record. Adam told me I shouldn't. There's not really a whole lot of other music to talk about, but I'm kind of on the fence myself. So you know what? Let's flip a fucking coin. Heads, I review it. Tails, I don't. Obviously, if it's tails, I just delete this footage and nobody knows. Heads. I don't know if you saw it, but it was heads. It was heads. Anyway, let's talk about this new Lord of the Lost record. Judas is the latest studio album from German Gothic metal crew Lord of the Lost, who, over the course of the past decade, have been responsible for some pretty ambitious, high-concept and lengthy material. Or at least, that's what I've been told. Truthfully, this is my first encounter with Lord of the Lost, and as such, I went into this record relatively blind. I was aware of the fact that this is a double concept album, one which seeks to examine the impact of Judas Iscariot, a disciple and one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ, in turn kind of rebranding him, repainting him as a tragic anti-hero. But aside from that knowledge, I knew nothing about this record or this band until I clicked play, which, in retrospect, I 100% regret. Oh, how I wish I could return to those simpler days where I had no idea what the fuck this album was or what the fuck this band was about. Those truly were innocent times. Judas is quite possibly the most unnecessarily bloated and pretentious record I've yet to hear in 2021. Clocking in at an hour and 44 minutes, it is overflowing with incredibly repetitive, monotonous, edgy, lackluster wannabe gothic metal tripe that fails conceptually to live up to its own ambitions. To be entirely fair, there is genuine passion on display here. This isn't a heartless, soulless affair by any stretch, and to be even more fair, if you're willing to comb through the nearly 2-hour runtime, there are some decent numbers to be found. Take for instance the lovey-dovey gothic pop metal of The Heartbeat of the Devil, or the genuinely pretty evocative instrumental melo-drama of Be Still and Know. For the most part, I find myself consistently liking and enjoying a lot of the doomy undertones and the string and orchestral work across the record, and I don't even mind Chris Harm's vocal performance. It's a little bit one note. I mean, he does have a pretty limited range, but it's mostly effective. His thick German accent combined with his deep, bassy, monotonous voice kind of sounds like a weird fusion of Till Lindemann and Andy Biersack. But man, you gotta comb through a lot of shit to get to these little insignificant kernels of corn, and in my opinion, it's just not ultimately worth it. A lot of the tracks just aren't really dynamic or engaging. They're very forgettable, very repetitive. They often rinse and recycle a lot of the same refrains and melodies and riffs and arrangements. The track for They Know Not What They Do is a great example of everything I'm talking about, just kind of bouncing back and forth between the same verse and the same chorus over and over and over again, throwing these same choirs, these same guitar riffs on top of everything. If I was listening to this on vinyl, I honestly might have assumed that there was something wrong with the record itself. It's just so repetitive in this particular number. There are a lot of ballad-like numbers that all kind of bleed together. They all flow the same, they all sound the same, they all talk about kind of the same things. I feel like I'm hearing a lot of the same choir and guitar work over and over and over again across this record. Side note, it doesn't help at all that the guitar tone is just absolute fucking shit on this thing. On some of the more riff-centric numbers, it honestly sounds like the guitars are literally being dragged through industrial static and mud, and maybe that would be a great description for like an industrial grindcore record or some fucking super crazy Code Orange shit, but it does not work for Lord of the Lost at all. There are some industrial beats and passages across the record that, to their credit, attempt to break up the monotony of this whole thing, but even they get really tiring really quickly. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, even if every fucking song on this album was a certified banger, I would still have a lot of difficulty listening to this because it's just so long. The band so continuously, almost unapologetically repeat themselves so often over the course of an hour and 44 minutes. So much of this material blurs and bleeds together so quickly that it just becomes a chore to listen to. Like, let's put it this way, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine ordering a steak, a really nice steak in a really nice restaurant, only to discover that it's 50% fat and 50% gristle left over from the flat top or a fucking frying pan. That's this album in a fucking nutshell. And here I am sitting in the fucking dining room saying, don't send it back to the kitchen, send it back to the fucking butcher. There is a lot of shit to trim off this motherfucker. On top of that, the story and the overall concept of Judas is, in my opinion, extremely underdeveloped and, in turn, underwhelming. At no point am I ever really learning anything new or significant about Judas. At no point am I learning about how his actions, how his betrayal of Jesus Christ impacted Christianity and modern religion. And at no point am I ever really understanding why Lord of the Lost is so fascinated with this character. Because instead of diving headfirst into that potentially juicy subject matter, the band is just kind of treading waters and running laps with the same tired subjects of betrayal, heartbreak, and loss of faith that make up nearly every song based on or directly about Judas. I mean, over the course of the past 50, 60 years, everyone from Bob Dylan to Johnny Cash to Woody Guthrie to Lady fucking Gaga has either written extensively about Judas or used him as a metaphor for many of the same things that make up the bulk of the lyrical content on here, and all of them have done so objectively better. There was a real opportunity here, in my opinion, to create something with the size, the scale, the literal biblical magnitude of Jesus Christ Superstar, albeit with a much darker edge and a new perspective. And instead, Lord of the Lost just kinda do the same thing everyone else is doing, except now it's sonically heavier and there's a shitload of piano parts. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Oh, and also, it's longer than your average Hollywood motion picture, because of fucking course it is. I'm giving this a 1 out of 5. This was a chore to listen to. While there were aspects of the record I genuinely enjoyed at first, which I have noted, and some tracks that I did thoroughly enjoy, which I have also noted, they are ultimately not worth the nearly 2-hour runtime, the nearly 2-hour maelstrom of mediocrity and wasted potential. I have zero clue whatsoever if the band's other studio albums are even semi-similar to this, but if they are, then Judas sure as hell convinces me that I don't need to check out any of that stuff anytime soon. If you've got nearly 2 hours to kill and you're just a sucker for some super artsy-fartsy, melodramatic, over-the-top epic bullshit, then by all means, go nuts, have fun. Maybe you'll get a lot more out of this than I did at the very least, but to everyone else out there, screw it. Just go listen to literally anything else. Like, my god, folks, if you fucking play your cards right, you could probably listen to 3 completely different records in the same amount of time it would take you to listen to this all the way through. Listening to this over and over for the sake of this album review was one of the most tiresome and aggravating experiences I've had on the Metal Meltdown in 2021, and as such, this album is easily a contender for worst album of the year, for me at least. 1 out of 5. Once again, it's got some bright spots and some genuine room for potential here and there, but all in all, I feel pretty comfortable telling you that this is a terrible album. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe, this button right here, so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.